students, I figured that it would be a good idea to give it a little bit of an overview as we move into finals about what we've covered so far. This video is going to just be the overview, but this playlist will be I'm going to break down some of these other different types of things, or at least put in videos describing each one of these things. So it'll either be new stuff or it'll be old stuff, but either way, for the final, you'll notice that we covered about 5 modules, and by about I mean 5 modules that are potential to be on the final. The first module is mostly review stuff, which is not necessarily going to be on the final, but may make its way onto the final. So that includes things like cellular respiration, which shows up in a couple of other different places. So module 4, for example, but is not actually going to make its way fully on the final as itself, or could, but either way. Also in Module 1 we talked about tissues and histology, so that's going to be the definitions of different types of tissue, so what makes simple epithelial tissue simple squamous epithelium, and can you identify it from a picture? Same goes for dense irregular connective tissue. For that, my recommendation for studying that type of stuff is just kind of think about different types of things that you're going to be looking at, some of the major areas, and being able to identify them based on a picture. And then surface anatomy. The surface anatomy stuff is going to be looking at buccal, clavicular, abdominal, pedal, things like that. So things from in anatomical position, how can you order things from head to toe or toe to head, or if you're, say, hula hooping, then what plane is that going to be on? If you're wearing a belt, what plane would that be going through? If you're wearing a baseball cap, what plane is the brim on versus the front of it? Stuff like that. Identifying those different portions of your body, so olecranon versus things like that, all of those different parts of your body that we had on that list. A lot of them have showed up since then, so you don't necessarily need to worry about that too much. Moving on to Module 2. Module 2 was all about muscles. So generally we talked about the muscle composition, so what is in a muscle cell and a sarcomere, different parts of a sarcomere and how they all work together. How they work together is the sliding filament theory, so that's the myosin binding to actin sites and then contracting, so being able to describe that. But then also we talked about the neuromuscular junction and how to screw around with that, so how to alter whether something actually goes from a neuron to a muscle with curare, Botox, and sarin. Remember that curare is going to directly block the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, the NACHR. Botox is going to stop the release of acetylcholine into the cleft, and sarin is going to cause it to bind constantly because of the disruption of the acetylcholinesterase. So that's the curare, Botox, and sarin, and that is Module 2. Moving on to Module 3. Module 3 was all about neurons and special senses. So being able to understand the parts of a neuron, what's going to go on where, what is the different types of cells that are associated with neurons do. So that's neurolemmacytes, the oligodendrocytes, the myelin cells, things along those lines. How to establish resting membrane potential, and the 3 things that you need, which are sodium potassium ATPase, negatively charged proteins, and cation leak channels, or the potassium leak channels. And that makes it so that it's more negative on the inside, sodium on the outside, more potassium on the inside. And then how you can take a graded potential, so EPSPs and IPSPs, and transform them into an action potential, and then transform that into other things later on. Finally, we have the special senses, so understanding senses in general, what are chemoreceptors versus mechanoreceptors versus other different types of thermoreceptors, other things like that. And then also the specifics of special senses. So hearing, we talked about hearing a fair amount, vision and color vision deficiencies, but you don't necessarily need to know the specifics of color vision deficiencies, just essentially how vision works. Olfaction, so smell, and how that all gets going, and gustation. With each of those, you need to know kind of how you end up developing that action potential in the first place, and then where it goes to in your brain to be processed fully. Okay. Turning the page, we have Module 4. Module 4 is going to be respiration and cardiovascular, so heart and lungs. Within the respiration section, you need to vaguely know about what's going on and how the lungs actually work, how you end up getting oxygen from one place to another, and how you remove carbon dioxide from the system. So that is going to be dealing with partial pressures and then also dissociation curves, hemoglobin dissociation curves. So when we're talking about those dissociation curves, that means being able to read it and then also knowing what happens with a leftward shift versus a rightward shift. Leftward, rightward. And then, so that's the respiration stuff. Cardiovascular, you need to know about the different types of electrical aspects that we talked about. So the SA node and how that ends up bringing electricity to the rest of the heart, making sure that it squeezes from the bottom up instead of from the top down. So that's the SA node to the AV node to the AV bundle, to the branch bundles, to the Purkinje fibers and up. And then also the specifics about the pacemaker potential and how that gets translated into a cardiac potential. So that's well, I'll talk about that more in a different video. And then you also need to know about ECG and blood flow through the heart and blood flow through the body in general. Additionally, you need to know about the chloride shift, which I should probably write up here. Okay, and that kind of fits within both of the areas. Finally, the most recent module that we have done is Module 5, which talks about the integument and then vitamin D. Vitamin D actually kind of fits with the rest of it. So knowing about the integument and glands that are associated with the integument, knowing how the kidneys work and how nephrons work, and then also that vaguely deals with ORT as well, but kind of in a different type of way. And then bones and how bones actually function from a physiological point of view. So ossification and what different portions of different bones are. You'll notice that muscle identification and bone identification are not included on this. You won't need to know those for the final exam. This is all of the information that you're going to need to know for the final exam. Yes, it's a whole lot of information. Yes, we will be here to help you. So if you have any questions, please come and just ask.